You're listening to episode 45 of Literacy in Color. Today, we're chatting with Dr. Treasa Bowe, a seasoned primary school teacher from Cork, Ireland, with over 25 years of teaching experience spanning both Ireland and Los Angeles, California. Her passion for literacy instruction has been a constant throughout her career, leading her to attend and present at numerous national and international conferences. Dr. Bowe's PhD research delved into the role of on-site continuing professional development in promoting a whole school approach to evidence-based comprehension instruction. More recently, she's gained recognition among educators across the Atlantic through her Instagram presence as @Between the Covers of a Good Book, where she shares how she uses research on oral language, reading, and writing to inform literacy instruction in upper elementary grades, with a particular focus on morphology and etymology. Today, we're going to get a global perspective on morphology and etymology instruction, so let's dive in. Welcome to the Literacy in Color podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Sullivan, a science of reading advocate with over a decade of experience as a reading interventionist and literacy coach. I'm passionate about making evidence-based instruction both effective and engaging. If you're interested in captivating our learners on reading fluently and understanding language, or as I like to call it, keeping it colorful, then you've found the right place. Each week, we'll explore intriguing lit bits and practical strategies around the science of reading and structured literacy to help you be colorful and teach colorfully. Are you ready to bring literacy to life? Let's color outside the lines and make an impact together. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Literacy in Color. Today, we are joined by a guest from over the pond in Ireland. We have Dr. Treasa Bowe with us, and I have been following Treasa for many years now. She is actually one of my favorite people to follow if you are interested in morphology and etymology, but honestly, she is a wealth of knowledge on so many different things. If you want to consider big names in the science of reading community over in Ireland, she is a must follow person. So first of all, Céad Míle Fáilte. 100,000 welcomes. I am so happy to have you here today. So welcome to the show. And can you briefly just introduce us, share a little bit of your background as it relates to the science of reading?
I can, of course, and thank you so much, Michelle, for first of all, the invitation, but secondly, the lovely greeting there in Irish. And that fits in so well with everything we do because it's bringing languages and words in together. So a little bit about me. Well, this is year 25 for me in the world of teaching, and it's been quite the journey. I fell into, I suppose, the world of literacy and literature by accident. When I graduated in Ireland in the year 2000, I got a scholarship to do a master's, and I had no idea what I wanted to do the master's in. So I gave myself my first year teaching just to try and get into the teaching world and figure things out. And at the end of the first year, I knew I needed to do something about my reading instruction. I was doing everything I had been told to do, and I just felt it wasn't effective and it wasn't engaging either. I was bored in my reading lessons, and I knew that my second graders they needed more than this. And that's where I said, okay, well, let's look at reading instruction. And I narrowed it down to let's look at comprehension. And in my mind, I thought I was doing, 2 years of part-time research. And I would be very happy when I would leave the research world at the end of it and I could get on with my own life. And it turns out that's not what happens at all. That when you fall into the rabbit hole and you finish up your formal research, you need to know more. If I was to give one message to people, it's you will always be on this journey. You will always be learning. And that's a really natural thing to do. So no sooner was I finished doing what I thought with reading, then I looked and went, I need to know more about vocabulary instruction as well. And that's the approach I've taken to my teaching career. Each year I look and I set a professional goal in terms of literacy, or it could be science of learning or engagement. And I try to narrow my professional development into that field. So if I'm going to a conference, that's what I look at there, rather than trying to do everything and then feeling that I have nothing achieved. Then in 2017, I was ready for a change, and everything that I had been doing in school had been drawing on American researchers. And I suppose I was just really conscious that I was interpreting their research and putting it into my own classroom. And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to have the opportunity to see American instruction and to work in an American classroom, and maybe to realize, oh, that's not what it was meant to look like at all. So for 5 years, I worked in Boyle Heights in Los Angeles teaching fifth grade, and then came back to Ireland. And I've been in Ireland again now for the last 3 years. So it's been a wonderful opportunity to bring my experience to an American classroom, to take from the American classroom, and then come back and, reestablish, I suppose, my identity as a teacher again, and going, what does this mean? So that's what my journey has been in a nutshell.
That's so exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And I laughed because I saw that you originally are from Cork. I said, oh, from Cork to California and back again.
Yep.
And I'm curious, now seeing two educational systems, what are some of the similarities and differences that you've noticed when it comes to literacy instruction in particular?
Well, there are strengths on both sides, and also there are things that can be changed on both sides. I think one of the biggest things is Ireland has traditionally been very slow to change its literacy instruction, and there are positives and negatives for that. So the fact that we don't rush into things or jump on a bandwagon means that oftentimes other countries have discovered what's not working. And we're still going, okay, that's brilliant. We found out what's worked from other people and we haven't gone down the wrong path. And that's possibly part of why Ireland does so well on reading tests and reading scores internationally, is that kind of the time that's taken before change is implemented. But on the other hand, in terms of American education, there perhaps is a lot more support in the classroom for teachers, particularly, and I know scripted curricula is a divisive issue. But the fact that there are resources and that teachers are not expected to create the content as well as deliver the content, it does give teachers the capacity to stop and to think about what they're teaching in a different way. Whereas Irish teachers have more autonomy. We have a curriculum, but our curriculum would be similar to your standards. So after that, we can create lessons in any way we want. We can implement lessons in any way we want. So there's much more freedom, but with freedom comes the responsibility and the time constraints of, I don't have a set of lessons that I have to teach, but now that means I have to find the set of lessons and I have to create them and implement them. So it's for and against in that way.
I actually appreciate the slow change. Even as science of reading and structured literacy were becoming more of a buzz in the States, in my particular district I was working with, I live in New Jersey. New Jersey didn't have any laws saying that you have to change, whereas other states had these laws and mandates that you have to adopt this type of curriculum, you have to have this type of training. And so it was up to the individual schools to make those types of decisions. So slowly but surely, as an instructional coach, we were training our teachers. They were gaining the knowledge. And it took a good 5 years until they did adopt a curriculum, because that's the time it takes with Board of Education approvals and such. But you look at other places who just jump in very quickly, and sometimes the teachers don't have the knowledge base to implement those things. So a slow approach is very wise. And I know a lot of teachers would crave the autonomy, but like you said, it comes with great responsibility in being able to have the time to create something effective and meaningful for your students. And I know that you were involved in developing your district's curriculum that incorporates a little bit of morphology and etymology and spelling all together as one unit, so that there is a cohesiveness and it's not just every teacher acting individually within their own realm. But before we dive into that, can you just share what maybe sparked your interest into morphology and etymology in the first place? Because that is a lovely rabbit hole to be down.
Oh, it 100% is. And it's one I didn't think I would fall down, because I'm from a generation where my parents learned Latin in school. And they loved telling me about, all the Latin they knew and all how useful it was. And I was going, yeah, Not really, like it's such an old fashioned way to teach. And then when I started looking firstly at vocabulary, I started introducing some of it. But I think the real benefit I saw was actually teaching in Los Angeles, and the community I was teaching in was predominantly Spanish speaking. And I was really the only one in the classroom without Spanish. And it was seeing the capacity that you had to use the language that the students had and really show them Spanish is such a fantastic language to work with. Like, here are how the languages connect and interact. And this is what you already know, and we can bring it in and develop both languages. And then I could see how actively involved the children became. But it wasn't, I think, until I then really developed my own knowledge on etymology and mixed the morphology and the etymology together that it blew up for the children. And I think this is one of the things that teachers often don't realize, because our comfort level can stop us from trying it. We're going, well, I don't know everything, so I won't try it at all. Whereas what it actually is that the children don't have that discomfort that we have. They're just going, oh my goodness, of course, this is so interesting. This is fabulous. What about this word? What about this word? And they were word conscious in a way that I knew the research had always told me to make them word conscious, but I had always been trying to develop word consciousness. Whereas this was now children going, I've been thinking about this word here. Tell me more about this. Let's explore it. What layer of the language does it come from? The children lead this, and I'm along with them going, let me check that on Etym Online. Let me get that resource. I don't have to have the answers. I'm guiding their journey. And there are more times that I spend in the classroom going, I did not know that. That's fascinating. I never knew that. And what I've loved is seeing the community come together, because I was used to doing it in my classroom. And then as the approach spread through the school, you'll have teachers popping their heads in going, I've been thinking about this word. Could you tell me more about this? And sometimes it's the children that go, well, obviously it's this, and we can put it together. And seeing children as young as second graders and first graders saying, well, why is it this case? It's just such an empowering strategy for children to have. And it is just so interesting, I think, for everybody who has started working with it, from the youngest children to the oldest teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. Oftentimes people will ask, how do you know that? How do you know all of these things about language? And I don't have an answer for them. And I feel very blessed because my parents are from Poland. So I grew up bilingual, speaking Polish and English. And then in school, I took a little Spanish. In college, I took a little Portuguese and a little Latin. And I've always had this interest in language. You were talking about how you were working with Spanish-speaking children, a Latin-based language. How much of our Tier 2 vocabulary is Latin-based? And when you have this knack or an ear for a different language, it opens your eyes to see the connections that are profound amongst all of the words in the world. It is beautiful to see that curiosity light up in children. And I think we as adults can have that same curiosity. And like you said, those beautiful aha moments even today. And that's why I feel like morphology instruction never ends. We're always learning something new and exciting. So when it comes to your district's curriculum that you put together, what inspired that work?
Well, I suppose we have a slightly different definition then of district as well, because Ireland is so small. Schools are their own districts. So there is no expectation that two schools next door to each other would be teaching the same curriculum. So I moved back to Ireland to a school that was developing. It had been established in 2015. So each year they were adding a new class level to it. So when I came back, it was the first year that there was 5th and 6th grade together in it. And I was the 5th and 6th grade teacher. So it was an ideal opportunity. The school was looking at spelling in particular. And I was brilliant. Spelling was also the focus that I had set for myself in the past couple of years. So we looked at introducing morphology. And the first thing that we realized was we needed a scope and sequence. We were also introducing UFly down the school. So it was a wonderful opportunity to stop and say, okay, how does UFly begin the gentle introduction in the infants to second class? How does it start introducing morphology there? What can we do to supplement that introduction to make sure it's as effective as it can be without overwhelming either the teachers who are already introducing one program and the students. And then we've looked over the last 3 years at what's the scope and sequence for third class to sixth class. And we've seen great progress with our students and interest with our students in terms of morphology, etymology, and we've looked at spelling rules as well in with it. And then what support, because I think it's not just about having a plan or resources. It's like you alluded to, it's teacher knowledge. So we don't have a formal literacy coach or an instructional coach structure in Ireland. So it was looking at within our system that we have, how can we free up teachers who have expertise and knowledge so that they can either model or support and make sure that something that I suppose is so new and different to many people could be something that was doable, achievable, and that it would be, like you said, really implemented properly over time rather than it being this year we're going to do this, next year we're moving on to something else, just to make sure that this was supported until the point that it became natural. So it was not just the putting it onto paper, it was how do we bring this into practice?
And kudos to you. I know you have a little cohort of you that travel over back to the US to go to the Reading League every year. So talk about building teacher capacity and having the ability to get really high quality professional learning too. And when it comes to designing your curriculum, I love the slow rollout that you're addressing one grade level. You built on that for the next class. How did you go about perhaps choosing the morphemes or even the topics so that there's a vertical alignment across the classes that promotes this deeper learning?
So I had some research done from earlier and is looking at the fact that you didn't necessarily need a scope and sequence in the same way that it's essential to have a scope and sequence in phonics instruction. However, once you bring it to school level, it's not going to be implemented properly unless there is a scope and sequence. So I sat down and looked at, okay, which are the morphemes that are used the most? And in terms of these ones are the ones that we refer to like struct and spect. You're absolutely not leaving that till sixth class. They're going to be one of the first ones we're working with. Whereas then looking at ones like we looked at seed and path and cron, that we could save them till fifth or sixth grade, because while they may come in different places, these are going to be less useful because they just tend to come up in words less frequently with it. We're also very aware that teachers will then bring in more into it. So, for example, in sixth grade, we work with Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. So we are like all the time looking at the Greek origins, and it's absolutely brilliant when they're looking at Gaia going, oh, wait, this is where Geo comes from. You're going, it is. So linking it in with that, in terms of the topics, we were very much focused in on developing background knowledge in our school and having a spiral curriculum where each month we have a topic or a theme designed and that it spirals up through the school then. And then it made it much easier to look and say, okay, if exploration is going to be a theme here, then it makes sense that maybe in sixth class we could be looking at nav and looking at like navigate and developing words around this with it. So it's still a work in progress. I think it will always be, but there has been a lot of collaboration and just, I suppose, time spent looking at what do we teach and what then can we link so that it's not extra pieces that the teachers are doing. We never want it to be, oh, I must do morphology and then I must do fluency. By the time we're in sixth class, that rope needs to be really woven tight. So our teachers are able to have lots of pieces coming together rather than separate components.
That's really helpful. And that's probably the biggest question that always falls in my lap. Is there a morphology scope and sequence? And truly, there isn't, but institutions can create ones that will work for their particular group of students. And I think that's really helpful to have structure, but also a fluidity where you're going to take those high utility morphemes that they're going to come across earlier in print and introduce those first and still leave room for the curious, investigative side of things. And even when we consider vocabulary, when we have lists of vocabulary words, like these are the words to teach. That's not the most authentic way to teach vocabulary. The most authentic way is when it's within the books that we're reading as a class, and to have those real experiences to learn words that way. So I think the same goes for morphology. When we are experiencing morphemes in print, that's going to be the most meaningful ways to draw those out and have those conversations like you talked about. I love that example with Percy Jackson too. And how exciting is it when they start spewing off word origin?
It's unbelievable when you see the capacity children can get to, because the class I had last year, I had them for 2 years. I looped with them. So it was my first time experiencing this with a class that was on their second year of it. And they were absolutely incredible. And they've now moved on to middle school in different schools, but they've been coming back saying, oh, well, I was doing history and we were learning about the scriptorium. So I just told the teacher that was script, meaning to write, coming from Latin. And it made sense because the monks were bringing the religion, from, and they were speaking Latin. And I was sitting there going, yes, you did. You've really gotten it, and you can apply it and it makes sense. And I think they're the keys to it. The children see how it makes sense. A lot of the things I suppose we're very concerned about in Ireland is dyslexic students and what support can we give them. And it's reframing what we're looking at in terms of spelling, saying the system that maybe benefited the teachers. So the system I went through was, getting lists of words and learning them off by heart. And I succeeded within that system. So we can often believe that, well, if I was successful, then other people should be successful within the same system. Whereas what we forget is so many children and adults were failed by that system. Whereas what we're looking at, if we add in morphology and we add in etymology, we're making sense of the language, and we're empowering people to say, oh my goodness, there is a structure to the language. I don't have to try and memorize lists of words. Instead, I just need to understand the framework around which the language was built. And then everything makes sense coming out of that. And that is so empowering. And it's so empowering for the children and the adults who may have struggled, coming up through the school, to realize, oh my goodness, there's a logic to this. And that makes the greatest difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are so many accounts on social media poking fun at the English language. And it is funny. We have It's Bobby Finn doing those silly videos, or now even the dictionary, Merriam-Webster on Instagram is hilarious. And they'll give the funniest little social media bits. But they poke fun at the inconsistencies in English. But truly, there is a reason and a logic to every single thing. I always want to write it in the comments, but it's because of this. When we think in terms of phonology alone, yes, it is irregular. But we always say English is a morphophonemic language. And if you're looking at only phonology, then you're disregarding a huge piece of the puzzle. And I think that's why looking at morphology is so empowering, especially for our dyslexic students, because it is like a puzzle. And finally, like you said, there is a logic to it to make sense of it. And I think it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing to tap into your classroom. So you've mentioned that all students in Ireland learn Irish. And I just want to give a little lesson to my American friends here, because I married a Sullivan. So I am Irish by my marital relationship. It's funny because my daughter, she's 5 years old. Years ago, she said, oh, I speak English, Polish, Irish, and Italian, because those are the things she is. And someone said to her once, well, you don't speak Irish. Irish is English. And I love the fact that you said speak Irish, because Irish is Irish and it is not English. So first of all, can you just make a distinction for our friends listening who might not know the difference?
So Irish, I know in America, it can often be said as Gaelic, which isn't quite right. So Scots Gaelic is a cousin, we could say, to Irish, which in Irish would be Gaeilge. It's a Celtic language. So we have two official languages in our country. We have Irish, which is the Celtic language, and then we have a completely separate language, English. And in most places, English would be the first language that would be chosen to be spoken by most people. But there are then particular areas within the country, Gaelic areas, where Irish would be the first language. So most people will have some level of fluency in both languages. Irish is formally part of our instruction until our children reach the end of their secondary school education. So that would be 18. So from 4 to 5 years old, starting school, to 18, our children are learning Irish as a separate language, even though it's unlikely in most schools for the children to be coming from Irish speaking homes.
Oh, I love that. And I was thinking of the comparison. Many people think Gaelic is the actual language, but it's just like Latin. Latin would be the Romance, and then within Latin, you have Spanish and Italian and all of those other things that fall under the umbrella. So beautiful. And for your students who are learning Irish, I'm sure there's morphology woven into there. So how does morphology and etymology play a role in supporting those students who are learning English as an additional language?
So our classrooms are very diverse in terms of languages. I have a lot of Polish children in my class. We would have children from lots of European countries mainly. So within a classroom, in Irish classrooms, you could have Spanish speakers, Portuguese speakers, French speakers, Polish speakers. I had a Greek speaker last year, Romanian. You have all the languages blending in together beautifully, while English is the predominant language, and then we have Irish as an extra language of instruction. So it does mean that we are total linguistic melting pots. Some languages connect together easier than others. So we always start by exploring the language tree with the students so that they can see it's not that my language isn't fitting in. It's here is your language, but actually it's on the Slavic branch of the tree. And you see how distant that is from the English branch of the tree. Whereas I have German speakers in my class this year, and you're looking going, you see, you're right next to the English there. So there's a very close link between it. Irish being on the Celtic branch of the tree means there's not always a direct comparison. And Irish traditionally wouldn't have necessarily been taught through the lens of morphology and etymology. It's a very unique situation where you have a second language being taught where it's not being spoken widely in the community. Like in a lot of cases where children are learning a second language, it's the language of the community around them, whereas it mightn't be the language of their home. Whereas in the case of Irish, it's neither the language of the home nor the predominant language of the community. So therefore, it is just a small portion of time that we get to attribute it to it. But we are spending our time now really looking at the Irish as well. So anytime I take a topic, and we might be looking at, the days of the week and looking at the etymology of the days of the week, which is so helpful in terms of understanding their spellings and indeed understanding where the words come from themselves. But I'll always then do the research and look and say, okay, so what about the Irish? We get to see the religious influence as well in some cases, because Ireland was the land of saints and scholars, and we had such an influence from the monks coming over in the early Christian time. Their influence then brought Latin into some parts of Irish. So, for example, the days of the week on Lune is Monday, but then it's linking in with the Romance part of it, with the Lundy, because of the monks and what they brought to it. So it's a work in progress, I would say, with Irish, but the capacity of morphology and etymology in terms of supporting children where they're learning multiple languages is absolutely huge, because it's a time where we are celebrating the fact that children are speaking more than one language. I found when I was standing in a classroom in America, being one of the non-Spanish speaking people in the classroom, I realized that this was a weakness for me and it was a strength for the students. And it was great to see that being celebrated as a strength rather than, no, you must learn English. It was, no, you must be linguistic and you must bring these languages together and not keep them separate from each other. We are introducing in the next couple of years a modern foreign language into primary school education in Ireland. And it's lovely to see where the start of it is. So we're going to start it in third class. So there will be 4 years of instruction, but the first 2 years are all about learning about word origins and understanding languages and taking words and exploring them across languages so that the children can use, just like that word tree, and look and see, okay, if we take the word tree, What is it in Irish? Who speaks another language in the class? What is it in Polish? Oh, does anybody speak Russian? Does anybody speak Ukrainian? Can you see the link between these languages? That makes sense because this is where it is. So it's a great way to celebrate, but help the students learn the way we know they should learn through the science of learning by making connections between things.
Those connections are true. That's how we strengthen those neurons.
Exactly, yeah.
Those neural pathways. That is really beautiful. I love the mention of the language tree. I haven't seen much use of it. Do you happen to have a nice reference that you like to share with your students?
I can send you a copy of the tree that we use because we have so many students. Like, Ireland's story is changing and there's so many people coming to Ireland now, as opposed to we were having this conversation in the 1980s, we were all leaving Ireland. So there has been an increased focus in the last 10 years of how do we support students, and we have professional development teachers who go around to schools, and one of them was the one who showed me the tree and the capacity of like using a read aloud but linking words across the tree. So I will send you the copy that I use with the tree because I put it at the beginning of lots of morphology lessons, but also we, like, any time that we would be exploring words, we constantly refer back to the tree, and it's just a wonderful resource.
Wonderful. I'm going to put that in the show notes once you send it over.
Absolutely.
And yeah, Ireland is a hot spot. My cousins in Poland, they go to Ireland to work when they get older, and they don't stay in Poland. Everybody's going to Ireland. And I was like, oh my goodness. I went to Dublin at one point. I backpacked Europe in college, and I remember meeting Polish waitresses, and that, I was speaking in Polish to them. I was like, how wonderful that it's such a melting pot.
Yeah, there's a really large Polish community here, but again, it's just a wonderful way for us to affirm languages rather than having, that deficit model of, oh, well, you don't have English. And instead going, well, you have Polish to start with. And let's see. And I found a wonderful experience in the last 2 years where we had a child join the classroom community from Ukraine with no English at all. But the Polish students in the class had enough similar words. And when you look again at the language tree, you see Poland and Ukraine right beside each other. And it made sense when we looked at that to go, oh my goodness, yes, of course, there's enough of a connection between the language that they're not speaking the same language, but they can understand each other. And there was great learning in all of that for us.
I remember in high school, there was a port of entry student from Slovakia, and she didn't speak a word of English. And I remember they linked her up with me, and I would speak Polish to her, and she would speak a Slovak language to me. And we somehow understood each other. And there were words that were iffy, but the general gist came across. That can go with instruction too. And I love this linking of the language tree. I think that's really special, especially when you have multilingual learners like many of our classrooms do. So let's get into the practicality a bit. How do you approach teaching morphology and etymology in the classroom? Like, what might a typical lesson look like? And I know there's many ways it can go, but perhaps you can paint a picture of one way.
Yeah, so there are multiple approaches, and it comes within other subjects as well. But when it is a discrete morphology lesson, I do short, regular bursts rather than a long lesson. And I think that's really important because there can be a tendency for people to think, well, if I do morphology Monday, and I just deep dive on Monday on it, and then I can tick the box and say, we did morphology. Whereas we know from the science of learning, less but more frequent is what makes the impact. So it might be 10 minutes a day. It might be 15. I have to be very careful with myself because these lessons can run away with themselves. But right from the very start, they are active lessons. So I use whiteboard and whiteboard markers an awful lot with the whole class. So anytime it's a morphology lesson, the marker is in the hand from the word go, because we had Lynn Stone out in the school talking to the staff, and like her thing was from the very word go, the children are writing this. We're not developing any of it without the writing. So it's the capacity of morphology to develop vocabulary and to develop spelling, but they must be integrated from the start. So we would start, if it was the first day of the routine, I normally give them 3 to 4 words that would have that morpheme in it. Depending on where they are in terms of comfort level of instruction, we might do it whole class, or they may work in pairs or small groups, breaking them up into word sums. So right from the very beginning, they're able to pull the words apart, and the word sums are just so powerful in terms of being able to build and deconstruct words and see their meaning. Then from there, we would then generate lists of words with that morpheme. I love the site Membeam. I think it's just the teacher's best friend in terms of being able to support your understanding in the beginning. But they have a lovely little podcast with a lot of the morphemes. So we may listen to that and try and see how many morphemes we can have in it. On another day, we can come back and I would give them clues to words and they would write the words there. So again, you're linking the context and understanding of the word and the vocabulary, but with the writing the whole time. And it's really easy then when it's on the whiteboard because it's think about it, talk to your partner, show it. And I'm always able to look around and go, okay, yep, this is going okay with this. And then reverse it the other way, give the sentence, don't put the word in, fill in the blank with it. So we've gone from word level to sentence level with it. I do really value dictation, but I don't like leaving the dictation till the end of the week. And I know that's always been through the traditional model. I would prefer to take one sentence on a Tuesday, one sentence on a Wednesday, one sentence on a Thursday, because I get more feedback from that. If I'm looking at it on a Tuesday and I see, there are issues, I can fix that really easy on Wednesday. If I wait till Friday and I'm looking, going, wow, this did not make sense to the students, that's 4 days of instruction that are gone. And I think with the dictation, it's also really important not just to look at the morpheme you're working on, but also to say, well, what have you worked on last week? What did you work on last month? What have you worked on 3 months ago? And have that opportunity to completely build in words there. So it may be that we're doing great with the morpheme we're working on right now, because that's in our short-term memory. But you're looking back going, but we are not doing well with the assimilated prefixes. Or equally, you're going, but I can see here that there's an issue with doubling. So I can go back to that. So you're just building in those opportunities for review the whole time. In other days, we could work on reading a little passage that has a lot of opportunities to read words with that morpheme in it. And like ChatGPT is your best friend with that. So rather than you sitting down for ages trying to craft that, I am a 6th grade teacher. I work with 12-year-olds, write a 10-sentence paragraph using this morpheme. You do need to, however, watch it because sometimes AI doesn't necessarily know the morphemes as well as we do. And that's not a morpheme belonging to that family. So watching it there helps. And then we build word sums, trying to bring in as many spelling rules as we can into it. So all the time integrating the spelling rules, and then lots of games. So across a week or a fortnight, they would be a lot of the work that we would do with the formal instruction of morphology. But I would always have an eye to my content lessons in particular. So history, geography. We've been studying a very influential Irish leader, Daniel O'Connell, in history, and we were looking at Catholic emancipation, which, as you know, is like a huge word for students, and they're not going to come across this anywhere else except in history lessons. Like you've got the Emancipation Proclamation in America, and similarly, it's a kind of once-off word that the children have to come across. But yet they need it, because if you're going to write or talk about that period in history, this is a word you're expected to have. So being able to look, and they could see man in it and they knew man meant hand and they knew the E meant out, and looking at like you were literally taking somebody out of somebody else's hand, you're freeing them. Once they saw that, that's where the power to use that word and spell that word comes from. And I was speaking to a secondary school science teacher recently, and she had started introducing morphology in terms of spelling into her class. And what she had said was she had seen students avoiding using technical terms that they needed in science because they didn't know how to spell it. They knew how to say it, but they didn't know how to spell it. But once she started introducing morphology to them, then they were able to break up the word, and then empowered them to use the words that they needed to have. So they're just some of the ways that morphology can empower students and just be really practical in helping our students right across the curriculum.
That was such a beautiful, brilliant breakdown. I love hearing your lessons across the week. It just makes it practical. And I feel like many times people get overwhelmed with the idea of morphology. And like you said, even these big drawn out lessons, like, oh my goodness, I have to teach this morphology deep dive. And really, it's the quick bursts that are going to make more of an impact. And I loved how you talked about spelling from the get-go. I absolutely am obsessed with Linstone. If you're listening, Linstone, we adore you. I think it's really, really important to have that spelling connection as well. And when you think about this grand theory of orthographic mapping, we're mapping the sounds to the symbols and the symbols to the sounds. And yet sometimes those sound symbol relationships are a little awkward.
Mm-hmm.
And when they are awkward, it's because we can explain these words using morphology and etymology. And so it's not necessarily always grapheme to phoneme correspondences. Sometimes it's these morphemic representations that we need to map in our brains as well, and have in our brains knowing that SPECT always is having to do with C, no matter how it's pronounced, because sometimes when we have ion at the end, we're going to have a sh sound instead of a t sound. And yet the spelling is going to be intact because we practice spelling that unit. And so many diverse opportunities from word level to sentence level to phrase level and breaking it up into morphemes. So it's really special how you've designed that. I really, really love that. And do you have an example of perhaps one of the games that you like to play with your students?
We do lots of different ones. So I try to do review a lot because I'm always really conscious that sometimes the lessons get taught in isolation. And nothing happens in isolation. You know, when you're reading the text, you've got so many coming together. So I've used Jeopardy Labs, is a lovely site, and it's just so interactive. So I've created Jeopardy games that are online, and the children work with that. This year and last year, we also did a morphology winter carnival. So they just had very simple, like the Connect 4 game, but it was interactive with putting morphemes together and Jenga and different games with that. But equally, if you think about any of the games that an infant level teacher or kindergarten teacher uses, they can all be used with morphology. And I have never taught infants, and I'm at the stage in my career where that would give me anxiety thinking about going down to that level. But I've often been really jealous of seeing, you know, the nice games that they play, you know, the boom, cap, snatch, and any of those. All of those are so possible. But what you want to make sure is that whatever game you're doing, the focus is always on the meaning and the structure of the word. So sometimes I see things like, I was looking at a book yesterday that was meant to support morphology, but what it was like there was word searches, and there was, you know, color the picture where you see these words pink and these words blue. And looking at that, you're going, that's like, it's not doing any harm, but it's not actually helping the student break the word down. It's not getting into the depth that we want them to do, where they're able to see, oh yes, look, that's prediction. And it's not that it's got dict in it, that dict means, you know, to say, and pre means before. So that, like, we're linking the structure of the word with the meaning of the word in whatever game we're playing. So a lot of the games will either have the meaning of the word and they get to find the word, or it will have maybe that you have prefixes and bases and suffixes, and that they have to create words from them. So even simple, like, while it's not a game, the word matrix itself, having them work with that, to the children, that's as active and enjoyable as any other ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you talked about the meaningful aspect to it, because this is my 2025 prediction. Morphology is becoming a buzz term now. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be coming out with morphology resources more and more and more. And just be a mindful consumer. Always think back, is this relating back to the meaning and structure? Is this going to be a meaningful learning opportunity? And it can be fun, but be wise. I think that's important. So when we are explicitly teaching our students morphemes, and we're hoping that they are picking up what we're putting down and not just learning things in isolation, how do we really help them internalize and apply words that are perhaps multimorphemic in their writing pieces over time?
I suppose part of it is going back to the rope and making sure that it's sufficiently integrated, because a lot of the words we explore, if we leave them in isolation, then they're never going to have the context to use it. So what you're looking at there is, how do we develop their oral language so that they want to say things that use multisyllabic words? And one of the greatest ways we can do that is through literature and through read-alouds. Read-alouds at all class levels, but particularly at the younger class levels where they may not be reading as complex a text. And that's because of their decoding capacity. So therefore, the teacher's read aloud is really important at extending that vocabulary. The second thing I would say is, you want to create a context where the children are writing about something that needs that. So like if we are working with Daniel O'Connell, there's loads of opportunities for me to work at sentence level and at paragraph level where I build in the writing opportunities. So will they need to use emancipation in there? Yes. I think as well, by linking this all to the different layers of language, we can empower the students to understand what words they use. And Zaretta Hammond did a beautiful talk about this at the Literacy League, where she spoke about empowering children to be able to see the synonyms, but also the cultural relevance of them. So like I know sigma and bruh and all of that now, they are real words. But what we want the children to realize is, you use that in the context of talking to your friends. You don't use that in your writing unless you are trying to create the voice of a young child talking to friends. What type of words would you use then? So you move up to the Latin layer if you're doing some writing, because you're going to elevate the word choice you're using. But you're writing now in science. So which layer of the language do you think you should be using in science? You should be using the Greek. And for me, I think I was missing this in the beginning, integrating those layers in, because if you're looking the whole time, you're going, but like, why didn't you spell that with a Y? If the child doesn't know it's a Greek word, knowing that Greek words are spelled with a Y isn't going to help them. So making sure that they understand these words tend to be Greek, these words tend to be Latin, French. And therefore, when you're hearing the k sound, and we know it's chlorophyll and it's a science word, then we're straight away thinking CH, not K. And we're thinking PH, not F. And we're thinking Y, not I. But you don't get any of that if you don't know the layer that you're working within. So I know I've kind of gone on a tangent from where you started with, but it's about vocabulary development and setting up the context for them.
That's really important. I love how you talked about the weaving of the rope together, because now people are getting excited about morphology and they feel like they need morphology lessons in a box.
Yeah.
And you're then not bringing it back.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to always bring it back. And it's not just about teaching morphology. It's about bridging together phonics and bridging together syntax opportunities. Now you're teaching grammar. All of a sudden, this suffix made this word a certain part of speech. And you're teaching vocabulary development. You're teaching language structures and language of origin and all these wonderful things. And it takes a really wise teacher, a teacher who feels like they have the capacity to do that, to bring all of those pieces together. And sometimes that's not going to be available in a boxed curriculum. That comes along with time.
Yeah. I've been lucky enough to be in the senior classes. Like I mentioned, that my experience is not as an early years educator, which is unusual for Irish teachers, because Irish teachers normally work up and down the class levels. But I have taught from second grade to sixth class. The advantage of that is it's really given me the opportunity to think about what is the nature of instruction, and particularly in the last number of years with the interest in the science of reading, what does this look like in the senior classes? Because there's so much focus, and rightly so, on the early years. But I have found that there is a move then from teachers to go, well, that must mean that I should be doing phonological awareness in that same way in the senior classes. And instead, I just find the reading rope is just so helpful to direct teachers so that we can look and go, but where are you on the rope? We're not in this isolated separate components part. We are in this really skillfully crafted. And it does mean that it takes a knowledgeable teacher and a confident teacher to weave those so that the children seem to be getting one seamless lesson. But in actual fact, you can stand back and go, no, I've developed background knowledge within this, and I paired the texts so that like they had opportunities to look at informational text, and that is linked in with the narrative, and the writing is coming out of that. But I was also aware of making sure that, they were interacting with this new information. So we used sentence level writing before we built to the paragraph level writing. And I do understand that it's overwhelming. And it, I suppose, returns to my original point where I said in the beginning, my journey started by focusing in on one thing at a time. And rather than trying to feel like I wasn't achieving any of my goals, I was able to say, I am working on reading comprehension right now. And I am aware that I do not know everything I need to know about vocabulary, but I need to be proficient in one area before I can go to the other. And now I feel I'm in a place where I feel quite successful at a lot of things. There will always be things that I'm trying to work through, and I'll always be putting another asterisk saying next year, need to learn more about this. But at least the things feed into each other. So even now, when I'm weaving things in together, the knowledge that I developed more than 20 years ago on vocabulary has not changed. It's developed, but it hasn't changed. So I'm in the place where I'm going, that's how it's fitting in now, as opposed to maybe when I was putting it separately in the early years of my instruction.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
For full circle moment. And that's why people are getting so excited about the science of reading. But truly, there's an art to teaching and there's the science of learning. And there's so much to know about delivering instruction. And our journey never ends. And I think that is so wise of you to share. And do you just have one more tidbit of perhaps advice that you want to leave for a teacher who's maybe feeling overwhelmed about morphology, or perhaps where's a good starting point to dive in to learn more?
So I suppose the thing is with morphology, like I said, you do not need to have the whole picture before you start. You start with very structured in the beginning. So what I'm providing at the moment for teachers in Ireland, I'm providing like a teach along with me course. So I have created slides where you go, these are the words. If you're taking here are all the lesson plans that I would use. You can start with something like that, something really, really structured, and get comfortable with that. And you don't need that then the whole time. Because as your knowledge begins and as you see the children taking over with this, then you're going to go on that journey with them. And don't be afraid of that. So don't be at the stage where you're discouraging children's questions because you're afraid of what the answer is. You don't need to know it the whole time. Some of the best questions I've gotten are from teachers sending children to my classroom. In December, there was a question from a child who had been working with UFly, and they'd worked on the sound that CH spells ch. And the child came up and said, what about Christmas? That's not ch. That's k. And it was brilliant. I do know that. It's Greek. And that's where it's coming from. And the teacher was delighted, the child was delighted, but I kept on going, that is an amazing question from a second grader. And that's the type of learning, or where they were looking at the philosophy rule and they're going, why is it not OFF for of? And we're going, actually, I can explain that. We can go into content words and function words to explain it. You don't have to have the knowledge. Somebody else will help you out with it, but just encourage this engagement from the children where they're looking, going, why? And celebrate with them. There's nothing a child likes more than for the teacher to go, that's a really great question, and I don't have the answer to that question. It's that good a question. So let's explore it and let's try and find out. Google, ChatGPT, Edam Online, they are all your best friends. Edam Online nearly has the answer to everything, but don't be afraid to use it, and don't be afraid to pull out the phone in the middle of class and go, let's check Edam Online together and let's look at it and we can find out what the answer might be to it.
If you were to look at my search history, Edam Online every single day, all day.
It's a story.
Yeah, but that's really lovely. And I think it's great when kids ask those types of questions, because then the response, those are the stories that will stick and they will never forget. they will never forget the answer to that. And that's another way to solidify that spelling, meaning, reading connection. So wonderful, wonderful. Well, this has been such a lovely conversation. I feel like I could talk to you all day long. We're going to bring this to a little bit of a close. Is there anything else that you would like to share with listeners? And maybe you can also share where they can find you and connect with you further, because like I said in the beginning, you are a wealth of knowledge and it is a joy to follow you along on social media.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm on my journey, and that I think is what my Instagram is. This is my journey, and teaching was my journey. I started it when I was in the United States in 2000. It has been my thinking process as I have come back. So my Instagram account is between the covers of a good book. And I've now branched a little bit in, particularly for Irish teachers, into the CPD, providing courses and webinars. And this summer I'm putting together a summer course for teachers, which is effective spelling for dyslexic students. So using morphology and etymology to create an inclusive classroom. So in that, what we're doing is just creating a platform where teachers can learn more about effective spelling instructions, spelling rules, the history of the English language, and then the Greek and Latin morphology. So it hopefully will be kind of an all-in-one place for teachers, not only to develop their knowledge, but for me, which I think was the most important part, okay, if I know this, what do I do first day when I go back to school? What do I have to start me off? So it's a really good starting point for teachers, I hope.
Beautiful. We could definitely link that in the show notes. And that is so helpful because it's one thing to accumulate the knowledge, and now how do we apply it? How does this look like in practice? So I'm sure that will benefit so many. So thank you for putting that out into the world.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And thank you so much for the invitation to come on and talk. It's always wonderful to talk to somebody else who, is a fellow word nerd and is just enjoying the application and the potential of morphology and etymology in the classroom.
Yes. And this is just going to be the beginning of many other fun conversations I'm sure we have.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for tuning into Literacy in Color. I hope today's episode left you feeling both inspired and equipped with something new to add to your teaching toolkit. If you're enjoying this podcast, it would truly mean so much to me if you'd leave a 5-star review. It helps other educators find the show and join our colorful community. And don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss an episode. For more tips, tools, and resources, be sure to check out the links in the show notes at michelleandthecolorfulclassroom.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next week. Until then, be colorful and teach colorfully.